I'm back with the 260 this morning, the Victor Victrola 2-60, 1927, and the service is completed. The reproducer that I'm using on this being the number 2, that's been rebuilt for a while, but it's on there. Notice that it is a gold-plated one, which matches the gold-plated tone arm, or the gold-painted tone arm, I should say. Originally, this did have a number 4 reproducer, but it is getting increasingly difficult to find number 4s that can be rebuilt. It's pretty rare, actually, because they are made out of pot metal. They swell, they crack, they split, and they're basically, nothing will line up anymore. Nothing will, the needle bars are all bound up. They're just useless. A machine like this, with the horn is not huge, so there's no reason why it cannot use a Victrola number 2. And that'll work just fine. It's portable. I mean, remember, this gold-plated number 2 probably started off life on a large Victrola 16. So it can handle a 260 portable. The tone arm supports also pot metal. You always, like I mentioned in the last video, you have to be delicate with them. Treat them very gently. Treat them like they're made out of glass, basically. Don't pull on them, tug on them, smack things around. Allow them to experience any kind of shock, and you're fine. Intergranular corrosion, which affects pot metal over time, is causing internal, pressure in that's going to cause, even if it looks nice on the outside, sometimes they do, it's brittle. It's brittle. It's gotten crystalline inside, and it will snap off and crumble and do all that stuff. This one, like I said, it has been repaired a couple times, well, once by me, and it's holding fine. There's no problem with it as long as it's not abused. You don't want to do that. I believe I mentioned this is a 1927 machine. They made these for a few years. In its day, this was the Victrola company, the Victor company's premium portable machine. This was an expensive machine. In today's money, you're paying over $1,000 for this. Well over $1,000, I believe. Or at least close to it. It was more expensive than the Victor Victrola 50, I know that. But then it was a few years after that. Very, very well made machine. Pot metal bits aside, this is a solid wooden box, very heavily made, heavily constructed. They hadn't quite, you would think with the Victor Victrola 35 that came along in 1923, they would have realized that this form right there, that's the Electrola, but same as the HMV 102, well, case-wise, you would think they would realize that something that size is more what the public was looking for in size and weight. But they went with the heavy machine, and it was a good seller for Victor. They sold quite a few of these. There's quite a number of them left around. You saw the parts machine I had here yesterday, and that's one of, I probably have 4 or 5 of these. But unfortunately, not all of them with usable tone arm supports. This machine is the exception, not the rule. It's been very well cared for. At some point, the spring was replaced. It did not have Victor markings on the spring, the main spring. Not unusual. People played, they didn't spend all that money to let it sit around and gather dust. They actually used these. And mainsprings break. Cold affects them. Use over-winding. If you try to wind it too much, some people don't know how to wind the machine. You can snap it. So it had, I'm sure, judging by the solidity of the grease in the can, I believe I showed it in one of the other videos, what it looked like inside. It had been in there a very, very long time. So this had a new spring probably in the 1930s or early 40s or something like that, long time ago. And she's ready to play now. I've already spun 10 or 15 records on it. I didn't mention the other day, this actually has a dealer tag on it. You can see it right there. Really hard to read. I'm not even going to... William E. Metzger, something like that. Doesn't say where they were. Whoopsie. But that's actually the only one I have that has that. Only a 260 I have that has that. I have plenty of other machines with dealer tags, but no other 260 has it. Well, let's see what we got here. We got Sweet Child. That's Paul Whitman. Let's spin some records on the 2-60. Always handle this with care. Just like that. No auto brake on these models. Let's change out the needle. And these have a spent needle can right here. They have a spent needle can, but they do not have a good needle box. They do have a clip back here. That is for your tungstone needle, you know, a little tin. If they sold a regular needle tin, it could go in there. But there was no provision for a little cup or something anywhere for your good needles. So I'm using my own. So far, only one person has been able to identify where I sourced those needle cups. No one else has guessed. Okay. Now let's turn the record over. And this was, the 260, in my opinion anyway, was Victor's last great premium machine. Just the build quality. The build quality. Like I mentioned in the other video about the 255 and the rivets, you know. I don't know if that was the start of the dumbing down of the American consumer, that they would buy a machine they couldn't service, but I guess it was. But the 260 was definitely Victor's best effort at the time. You know, they definitely did not hold back with this machine. It is the best of the best. You can't really fault the Victor company for using pot metal. They were all doing it. Some of them have been doing it for years, Columbia especially. It was the miracle metal of the age. It was easy to mold. It had a good flow. It was easy to make things out of it. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't exotic. You know, there was not like it was made out of solid silver or anything like that. And it was too soon to know what would happen to the metal 50 years later. They didn't know. They weren't looking that far in the future. For the moment, it was good. And like I said, it's very good for reproducers because it's light. And light reproducers and light tone arms are actually good for the records. You know, and they're strong enough. When they're brand new, they're more than strong enough to do the job. Tone arm support's included. It's only when they get very old that you start having issues with them. But the Victor company didn't see that far in the future. They weren't looking 70 years down the road or 80 years down the road. They were looking in a 10, 15-year time period that these machines were expected to be in use before they were replaced by an updated model or something like that. I mean, they did build them for the age. But realistically, they expected, you know, people would use them for 10 or 20 years, maybe, and then upgrade to whatever the newest model was. I mean, you wanted that. If you were in business, you want that to happen. And they built them so well because the American consumer at that time was not easily fooled into buying junk. They recognized quality when they saw it. They understood quality. And they also understood crap. So when you couldn't pawn them off crap unless you were charging almost nothing for it. So if you were selling a premium machine, it had to be a premium machine. And you could not cut corners and, you know, do things. How they got away with the rivets, I don't know. But then again, the company folded in '29. They were folded into RCA, actually. And that coincided right around the same time frame they were making the 255. So maybe that has something to do with it. They just figured, you know, at that point, who cares? But with this machine, they definitely cared, and they definitely did such a nice job. Everything is high quality, the motors, you know, and like I said, you can't blame them for the pot metal because that was just, it was considered, you know, exotic. That was technology, an advancement in technology to use pot metal in that era. Today, we think, oh, that's junk. Not then. go. And I didn't announce what that record was, and I will in just a second after we get rid of the old needle and replace it with a new needle. One thing about these machines, though, is they take a long time to wind. If you notice the small size of that handle, very small, it has to be so your knuckles don't smack the table every time you crank it. You have to crank this, if the spring is completely flat, you're going to crank it almost, well, you will crank it 100 times to get it up to full strength. We don't need that up there. I wanted to try a Victroelectric in here since I happen to have one handy. Out of the Dawn. Okay, put that in there. And the other one I just played. I never knew how wonderful you were, Paul Whitman. Okay. Remember, always treat the tone arm gently. Don't yank, throw things around. There we go. Take the needle out before you stab yourself. There we go. Into the spent needle can. We will secure that in its clip. And it's like I mentioned in the last video, it's very important that if you ever ship or try to ship one of these machines, that you remove that entire tone arm assembly with its reproducer and tone arm supports. Only 3 screws. Just 3 flathead screws, comes right out. And ship it separately in a very, very well padded up box or try to pad it and put it in the horn compartment. Because if you leave it like that and try to ship it, it's going to arrive broken every single time. I don't care how much padding you put around the machine. Just the bouncing around in transit will shatter that tone arm. The top will be missing. It'll be all loose and flopping around, and it'll be useless to you. And they do not reproduce that tone arm support. That's the hard part. It's not hard to find a 260, 2-60, if you're looking for one. eBay always has one or two, but finding one with a good tone arm or usable tone arm support, that is the hard part right there. Because without that one piece, what you have is not a phonograph anymore. You know, it's just a mechanical device that spins a turntable for you. You know, maybe you can stare at it and mesmerize yourself. I don't know, but you need that tone arm support, and no other Victor machine has one that will properly fit that. You can't take one off a credenza and put it on there, or obviously not one of the older Victrolas because they have a totally different setup. So if you break that, and the one from the 250 is almost as delicate, but it doesn't fit either. The 255, I'm sorry. So you want to be very, very careful in handling these machines. And there you go. There is a look at the dark burgundy 1927 Victor Victrola 2-60 portable phonograph. Yeah. Those hinges work so nice.